and I'll even turn my sound on now so you can hear me. That does sound better, doesn't it? I'll call your attention to the agenda. The first item is the minutes of the December meeting. I trust you've looked at them, but I will give you a few seconds to review them if you need that. If there's no objection, then we will the minutes will be received and approved. Is there any objection to that? All right, so they'll stand approved. All right, the next item on our commission is the commission and staff update. Dr. Lippard will deliver that make that report to us. Dr. Lippard, you are recognized, sir.
Thank you, Chairman. The first item I have is a commission update, and we have a new member, Representative Gary Hicks, as his role as the chair of House Finance is also a member of TACIR. Unfortunately, Chairman Hicks couldn't be here today, but we do welcome him to the commission and look forward to having him as a member. I have a couple of staff updates as well. First, Senior Research Associate Jennifer Arzotti recently completed a Master of Science degree in Communication and Information, focusing on strategic and digital communication, and this was at the University of Tennessee. This is Jennifer's second graduate degree. The other is a Master of Arts in Sociology from MTSU. Jennifer, could you stand for just a second? Please join me in congratulating Jennifer. Next, on sadder news, we have two commission members two staff members who are leaving the commission. First is Senior Research Associate Presley Powers, who is leaving to take a position outside of state government. And the other is Senior Research Associate Carly Van Sickle, who will be leaving the commission next month to start her own business. So if Presley, Carly, if you could both stand. And Presley and Carly have been fantastic researchers and great staff members, and we're going to miss them both terribly, but we do wish them the most success in their new endeavors. So thank you. And then finally, Director of Administration Michael Temmey is celebrating 35 years of service to the state of Tennessee this month. And we have a certificate for Michael, and we've also prepared, Chairman Yeager's office is working with us on a joint resolution honoring Michael's service. As I mentioned last meeting, Michael is facing some serious health concerns, and he continues to face those. So first I'll ask you to join me in congratulating Michael on this accomplishment, but also then to keep him and his family in your thoughts and prayers. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Do we have any questions for the director? There being none, then I'll call your attention to the first item of business on the agenda. The Tennessee Valley Authority Payments in Lieu of Taxes Annual Report will require a vote for approval. Jennifer Arzotti, am I saying the name right? Arzotti. I apologize. But anyway, Ms. Arzotti, our Senior Research Associate, you are recognized for a presentation of the report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning, Commission members. Like previously mentioned, my name is Jennifer Arzotti. Today, I am presenting for your approval the Commission's report from Tennessee Valley Authority, or TVA's, Payments in Lieu of Taxes, the pilot, and factors that may be affecting those payments and their distribution to the state of Tennessee and its local governments. You can find this report under tab 3 in your docket books. This report is in response to Public Chapter 1035, Acts of 2010, that has made the Commission's monitoring of changes in the wholesale distribution of electric power by TVA and its distributors for possible effects on the authority's pilot to the states in the Valley region for an annual requirement. For a quick overview of the pilot distribution, please see Table 1 on page 4, and for an explanation on how payments are calculated, Appendices A and B. For federal fiscal year 23-24, TVA's actual pilot totaled $588 million, of which $394 million were paid to Tennessee's governments, including $3.4 million in direct payments to counties. Payments for federal fiscal year 24-25 are estimated to total $600 million, increasing by about $12 million. The increase resulted primarily because of TVA's base rate increase, the end of pandemic era credits, and higher sales volume, partially offset by lower fuel costs. In federal fiscal year 24-25, Payments to Tennessee are estimated to be $405 million, increasing by $11 million, of which $3.4 million will be paid directly to counties. Tennessee's share of TVA's overall payments increased to 67.5% because of increases in both the state's share of TVA's power revenue and the value of TVA power property. For state fiscal year 24-25, allocations for the state's own agencies will increase by $1.9 million, but allocations excluding impact payments that are set aside for local governments in counties with TVA construction will decrease by $2.8 million for counties and $270,000 for cities. These allocations decrease for counties and cities because of an increase in the number of counties with TVA construction, resulting in more funding being allocated through impact payments. Impact payments will increase by $3.8 million for counties and by $1.2 million for cities. Counties being affected by new projects include Benton, Henry, Houston, Humphreys, Roane, and Stewart. The total payments, including impact payments, are estimated to increase by $3.8 million over those made in state fiscal year 23-24. These payments are increasing less for the state fiscal year than for the federal fiscal year because the state's fiscal year begins on July 1st, 3 months earlier than the federal fiscal year. As a result, Tennessee's distribution to the state and local governments for state fiscal year 24-25 includes TVA's payments from the last 3 months of federal fiscal year 23-24 when the pilot had decreased. For a more detailed look at the distribution of monies to cities and counties, excluding impact payments, please see Appendices C and D. And for impact payments set aside for local governments and counties with TVA construction, see Appendices E and F. This year, there were 3 important factors mentioned in the report that would affect TVA's pilot. The first factor concerns provisions in wholesale power contracts that 148 of TVA's 153 distributors have signed, granting these distributors flexibility to obtain renewable energy from non-TVA sources, potentially reducing TVA revenue and therefore the pilot. Under Public Chapter 1035 Acts of 2010, power purchased from entities other than TVA are subject to the equivalent payments required, but the payments may be reduced or eliminated by credits claimed for other taxes paid, for example, property, franchise, or excise taxes. However, only 7 distributors in Tennessee have purchased power from entities other than TVA in federal fiscal year 23-24, and as of December 2024, the credits claimed have exceeded the payments that would otherwise be owed under the Act, and as a result, no payments have been required. The second factor is the 4.5% wholesale rate increase, excluding adjustments made for changes in the cost of fuel, effective October 1st, 2023, combined with end-of-pandemic era credits, which increased TVA revenue by $637 million from what it would have otherwise been in federal fiscal year 23-24. The third and final factor is the TVA board approved a 5.25% wholesale rate increase that effective October 1st, 2024, which is estimated to produce an additional $495 million of revenue during federal fiscal year 24-25, excluding adjustments made for changes in the cost of fuel, this being the second base rate increase in 2 years. At the moment, Commission staff have no recommendations. However, for purposes of monitoring compliance with Public Chapter 1035, the Commission finds it would be beneficial for TVA to provide the Tennessee Department of Revenue a list of distributors purchasing power from non-TVA sources. This concludes my presentation. I am happy to answer any questions you may have, and with that, I request approval of this report.
Are there questions, members? There being none, then the chair will move approval. Is there a second for that from Mayor Anderson? Any further questions? There being none, those in, we take a roll call on this? Yes, sir. No, we're going to do a voice vote. Those in favor of approving the report say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. Carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
call your attention to the second item, our annual report on Tennessee's public infrastructure needs. I would refer you to tab 4, and Tyler Carpenter, our research manager, will make that presentation. You are recognized, Mr. Carpenter.
Thank you. Good afternoon, or good morning. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. I have Senior Research Associate Presley Powers up here with me today. Today I want to present the Annual Public Infrastructure Needs Inventory Report for your approval. The report can be found behind tab 4. This year's report includes projects that are or will be in the conceptual, planning and design, or construction stage at some point during the 5-year period beginning July 2023 through June 2028. I now want to draw your attention to a few points of interest in this year's report. First, if you will turn your attention to Figure 1 on page 9, you will see the total estimated cost per capita of all needed public infrastructure improvements in Tennessee increased for the 9th consecutive year. In Table 1 on page 10, you can see that in this year's inventory, state and local officials report a total need of $78 billion, which is $10 billion more than last year. The categories most responsible for the reported increase in total estimated cost are transportation and utilities and education. Infrastructure needs for transportation and utilities increased by $4 billion, or 11%, and now totals $39 billion. Transportation, which increased for the 9th year in a row, continues to make up the largest type of need in the inventory with $38 billion in reported needs. Education needs, which include both K-12 and post-secondary institutions, increased by $2 million, or 14%, and now totals $19 billion. K-12 school renovation costs increased by $895 million, or 16%. Schools in Davidson County, Wilson County, and Rutherford County accounted for most of this increase. Post-secondary education costs increased by $737 million, or 11%. Infrastructure needs at the University of Memphis and Tennessee State University account for half of this increase. And a breakdown of education infrastructure needs can be found in Table 2 on page 13. The final point of interest I want to highlight is that the percentage of funded infrastructure needs reported at the time the inventory was conducted increased by 1% from inventory year 2022 to 2023. As projects move from the conceptual stage to the planning and design and construction stages, more funding will become available for them. And that concludes my overview of the reported needs in the current inventory. If you would like to see how your county is performing, please look at the county summaries, which start on page 21. Appendix D contains information on project type and stage of development. And Appendix E contains information related to school districts. Lastly, I'd like to thank the development districts for all their hard work in collecting this information each year. I also want to thank Presley Powers and say that I am going to miss her, for the record. I also want to thank TACIR staff, who have also been incredibly helpful in the production of this report. Thank you for your time, and I am happy to answer any questions. And with that, I seek approval for this year's Public Infrastructure Needs Inventory Report.
The chair will move approval of the report. The vice chair will second. Are there questions on this report, members? I just have one. Of course, this report looks at our needs. Is there, for example, the Road Modernization Act that passed a couple of years ago, are the infusion of funds from that legislation, is that translated into this report in some way as you look at the total needs? Or I guess say needs met?
Offhand, I don't remember exactly when that was passed. If you know the date that was passed, it would have to have been passed and those needs either reported or in some stage of development as of July 2023. So do you happen
I think
to know
it
when
was. I'm pretty sure
okay.
it would be.
So
Yes.
then it would be in the inventory.
All right,
Yes.
got it. Thank you. Are there any other questions? Dr. Lippert?
And it would, the funding from that act would be reflected as well. Those projects would be shown as funded projects where we talk about that.
All right, thank you. Is there other questions? Well, there being none, then those in favor of approval of the report say aye. Opposed, nay. Carries unanimously. And thank you for a very good report. And I appreciate how you break it out by county, because I'm sure all of us will want to look at the counties of our respective districts or jurisdictions. Thank you very much for a good report. And I appreciate your compliment to the development districts who helped you get the numbers together. Thank you. All right. I would call your attention to tab 5 now, the public chapter 1013, Acts of 2024, vendor compensation for sales and use tax collection. This is a final report for approval. Members, Dr. Michael Strickland, our senior research associate, will make the presentation. Dr. Strickland, you are recognized, sir.
Thank you, Chairman, and good morning, Commissioners. The attached report on vendor compensation, located behind tab 5, is being submitted for your approval. This was prepared in response to Public Chapter 1013, Acts of 2024, which directed staff to study the cost to businesses of collecting and remitting state and local taxes, the cost to the state of Tennessee for reasonable remuneration for sales tax collection, including vendor compensation to businesses as compared to other states, and the cost to businesses of payment card interchange fees on the tax portion of transactions. After the presentation of the draft report in December, no changes were requested, but staff made some minor edits for the sake of clarity and added Appendix B with further details on vendor compensation as offered in other states. The report's 2 recommendations, however, remain unchanged. 1, if the state were to reinstitute vendor compensation for sales tax collection, the report recommends it continue to use a tiered set of rates and a cap structure to ensure compensation for smaller businesses for whom the relative costs of collection are greatest, without creating either a windfall for larger businesses or a revenue shortfall for the state. And second, given that the effects of excluding sales tax from card transaction fees are unclear, and that the lawsuit on the legality of such exclusions is currently underway in Illinois, the report recommends that Tennessee refrain from taking any action on card transaction fees until more information is available from the test case in Illinois. So if there are any questions, I am happy to take them, but otherwise I would ask for your approval of the report.
The chair will entertain a motion to approve, and the vice chairman will second. Do you have questions, members? There being none, then the motion is to approve. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. Carries unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
Let me call your attention as we're moving right along here today. Tab 6, Public Chapters 934 and 938 of the Acts of 2024, Child Care Business Regulations and Workers, the final report for approval. And you can find the detailed information, members, in tab 6. And Bob Morio, our research manager, will make the presentation. Mr. Morio, you are recognized, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning, Commissioners. Today I am presenting for your approval the Commission's report on the issues affecting the child care workforce and availability and affordability of child care in Tennessee, which you'll find behind tab 6 in your docket books. It was prepared in response to Public Chapter 934, Acts of 2024, which directed the Commission to study the characteristics and conditions of child care workers in Tennessee and explore the feasibility of expanding incentives and financial support programs for early childhood educators, and Public Chapter 938, Acts of 2024, which directed the Commission to identify laws, regulations, and rules that impose costs, financial burdens, or operating delays on child care business owners or prospective owners, and evaluate whether some of these barriers may not be necessary to protect the health, safety, and welfare of children in the community. Public Chapter 934 was the result of legislation originally sponsored by Senator Charlene Oliver, alongside Commission members, Senators Campbell and Yarborough. Public Chapter 938 was the result of legislation sponsored by Commission Member Representative Williams, along with Senators Watson, Yarbrough, and Chairman Yeager. Following the discussion of the draft report presented at the Commission's December meeting, staff has added some additional information for the final report, which I'd like to point out for you now. First, calling your attention to pages 23 and 24. One of the things highlighted in this report is the important role of affordable quality childcare for maintaining and growing Tennessee's workforce and stimulating economic development. The draft report described how in 2023 the state provided assistance to help Tyson Foods open an employer-sponsored childcare facility with capacity to care for more than 100 children near its complex in Humboldt, Tennessee. The state is building on this collaboration by launching a 3-year pilot program which intends to award $15 million in grants each year to fund innovative models of non-profit partnerships with private employers, aiming to expand child care availability for their employers' workforce. At the December meeting, Mayor Waters commented that it's much harder for small businesses to invest resources in child care than it is for major corporations like Tyson, and asked staff if there were any examples of collaborative organizations in other states where small businesses have come together to provide child care for employees. So we've added an example that we found from North Dakota, where 8 employers, including a local electric co-op and school district, formed a nonprofit organization to own and operate a child care facility in rural Mercer County. Together, they purchased a vacated church building, which now has the capacity to care for 77 children with guaranteed spots for employees of the partner companies. And there are examples also there that were in the draft report from Clarksville, Montgomery County, and Kingsport as well. Continuing over the next few pages, the report illustrates child care affordability issues across the state. One tool the state uses to help low-income families pay for child care is the Reimbursement Certificate Program, funded by the Federal Child Care Development Fund, CCDF. At the Commission's December meeting, Senator Yarbrough and other members raised some questions about how the state uses CCDF funds for the certificate program and other aspects of assistance for child care businesses. So pages 26 through 30 in the final report contain more information about CCDF and Tennessee's child care certificate program. Turning to pages 49-50, we have additional information about the ways the state is encouraging the expansion of shared services support structures for child care businesses as well. Lastly, the draft report recommended a business tax exemption for child care businesses. At the December meeting, Mayor Anderson and Vice Chairman Brooks discussed the possibility of tax credits to help companies provide child care. We've added a mention of this on page 51 of the final report, but note that additional research would be necessary to consider how such an idea could be implemented and what changes in state law might be required to do so. So with one minor exception, the recommendations presented in the draft report are unchanged for the final report. The recommendations are spelled out pages 3 through 9. Sorry for asking you to flip back and forth too far. First, to reduce confusion about enforcement of rules and regulations, including building and fire codes, the Commission recommends that the Department of Human Services reestablish regular regional meetings between child care services staff and child care providers and include staff in those meetings from the State Fire Marshal's Office. Next, because the regulation of extended care programs for school-age children located in public or private schools currently depends on whether those programs are administered directly by the school or by an outside entity, creating delays in getting approval for programs run by those outside agencies. The Commission has recommended that that DHS align fire code inspection requirements for before and after school programs operated by non-school entities in schools with the Department of Education's requirements for similar programs run by the schools themselves. Next, recent changes in policy regarding state fire marshal review of child care building plans and inspections for DHS licensing have left some child care providers confused about the role local authorities continue to play. Therefore, to minimize confusion for child care agencies opening new facilities, the Commission recommends that the State Fire Marshal's Office invite local fire marshal offices to conduct their initial inspections and any follow-up inspections at the same time on the same day as the State Fire Marshal Office inspections. The Commission also recommends local jurisdictions ensure pre-occupancy inspections are coordinated with states' pre-licensing inspections. The recommendations mentioned here have been supported by DHS and the State Fire Marshal's Office as well. Our research and that of others has found that local zoning and codes can create barriers to childcare businesses in some communities, particularly when local policies are more stringent than the state's licensing requirements, or when childcare facilities face tighter regulation and more scrutiny than similar uses like churches and schools. Every community's needs are different, but local planning officials dealing with the shortage of childcare providers should consider how their zoning ordinances might be restricting opportunities for childcare businesses needed in their communities. And so the Commission's report recommends that local governments analyze and align zoning for childcare businesses with zoning for schools and churches. There are also instances where local building and fire codes establish stricter requirements than the state's requirements for childcare facilities. But as with zoning, state preemption of local codes would not account for important differences in needs among local communities. Therefore, the Commission's report recommends local governments align building and fire codes with the state standards as much as possible wherever appropriate. Along with barriers resulting from regulations and rules, one of the greatest challenges facing childcare business owners is the difficulty of hiring and retaining workers. Owners are often frustrated that they cannot afford to increase low wages or offer more benefits because many Tennessee families can't afford to pay higher prices for childcare. The report describes the state's existing education-based salary supplement program, Child Care Wages Tennessee, which is designed to help child care providers with the problem. But some providers in our focus groups and interviews told us that the program isn't a good fit for some of their most experienced workers who aren't willing or able to pursue higher education. And so to further support the child care workforce and to incentivize commitment to careers in child care, the Commission recommends that the state develop another program like Child Care Wages to reward workers for years of service. The one change to a recommendation I mentioned a few minutes ago is just a technical correction to the next recommendation, that child care providers be given the same opportunity as public charter schools to purchase or lease local school systems' underutilized or vacant properties, which can be found at the bottom of page 8. The recommendation was just revised to suggest amending a more appropriate part of the Tennessee Code than what was originally included in the draft. Lastly, educational services offered by private elementary or secondary schools, colleges, and vocational schools are exempt from the state's business tax on gross sales, but child care services are not. Cutting taxes for child care businesses would allow them to direct more resources towards staff and other expenses. And so the Commission recommends that the General Assembly eliminate state and local business taxes for child care businesses, and that it also offset loss in revenue to local governments by providing with the base amount of funding equal to what they've received in local business tax revenue from child care providers in the most recent fiscal year, 23-24. So I thank you all for your feedback at the presentation of the draft report and for your attention to these difficult, important issues surrounding child care and the child care workforce. I am happy to answer any questions you may have before voting on approval of the final report.
I believe the chair will move it with a second from the vice chair to approve. Are there questions? Senator Campbell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I filed legislation to eliminate the taxes on child care services, and I guess you may not know the answer to this, but what I'd like to know is there are obviously a lot of places for those savings to go, and do we have any information on whether or not in other states where they've done this, those savings tend to go towards the child care workers, towards the families? Any kind of indication as to where those savings are realized?
Thank you for the question. How each individual state taxes or doesn't tax child care businesses wasn't something that we really dug into, so can't answer that for you at this time, but we'll be happy to assist you in any way as you work on your legislation.
Are there other questions? Yes, Mayor.
Mr. Chairman, do you think it's possible for you to expand a little bit on the role of the fire marshal and the fire investigator, and also touch on, in our county, for an example, we have 5 or 6 different water utility districts, which would require some of those, some of the changes that a fire marshal might require would increase cost of construction. Would you mind touching on that?
Sure. Thank you for that question, Mayor. I think that your last point about the different, utility districts and stuff kind of gets to why we're not recommending some sort of sweeping statewide, here's how everybody should handle their childcare, their codes, because you might have local differences like that affect how your jurisdictions are regulating building and fire codes. I think the biggest thing is really just that we're recommending is more coordination of the local jurisdictions might not be aware how they're specifically affecting childcare, and coordinating with what the state requires from the state fire marshal's office, with the local fire officials, with water officials, as you mentioned, with building officials, trying to bring them all together to look at specifically how it affects childcare would be kind of what we're encouraging.
Is that all, Mayor? Commissioner?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a quick question. It looks like most of this relates to child care centers. There's been a lot of discussion and differing opinions about home-based child care. Did you all look at that at all and have any recommendations related to it?
Yes, sir. Thank you. I think really the recommendations they apply broadly to when we're referring to child care facilities, be anything licensed from the home-based smaller child care homes through larger centers. The zoning recommendations in particular really affect the smaller homes. We talk in the report about where there's wide variation in whether child care homes are allowed at all in some jurisdictions, or how some of the zoning restrictions like lot sizes or different things really make it difficult to establish a home-based child care if you've got to have a 2-acre lot or something that really just doesn't make it financially feasible to do. Same goes for some of the building and fire code stuff, that if the local jurisdiction is enforcing a stricter code that have imposed a lot of burdens on someone trying to retrofit a home for fire safety for a child care. So there are a lot of ways that it touches on the home-based child care providers.
No, thank you. If I may, if there's no objection, I have a question. And although it's unscientific, we get periodic calls at the office from both operators of child care and folks who want to start a child care with a consistent complaint about the perhaps overregulation from the Department of Human Services. In your interviews and discussions, did you look at that issue?
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. The focus groups and really hearing from the child care providers sort of gave a mix of, the majority of those we surveyed and everything didn't seem to have problems necessarily with the regulations themselves. What we found more commonly were inconsistencies with how different regulations were enforced, or some of the inspections. Things might vary from time to time, or you might be hearing different things, or might not be getting a consistent explanation of what the rules and regulations are. And so that's where the recommendation to have these meetings with DHS staff and have the providers involved and the local officials involved, trying to bring more of the people together more often to give feedback to the department, seems to be the best way to try to smooth those out and work through those. Yeah.
Excuse me, I'm sorry. Who would, in trying to bring these groups together, do you propose, who would be the moderator or the person to bring all that together? Or
That's a good question. I think, the department that we've spoken to has talked about being available to do that. We were really grateful for the support and help from the development districts. Upper Cumberland, first and foremost, was really helpful.
Good.
I could certainly see regional entities like that being a helpful force in bringing the different parties together to have those regional and community discussions.
I think that's a really good idea. And members, if you have, particularly the members who are legislators or elected officials, it's a very good idea. Your development district might be the perfect agency to have meetings in the respective districts to bring these people together, where we can have a conversation, try to get a better understanding. Good idea. Are there other questions? Yes, Commissioner.
Thank you for your report. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not sure if your report covers this, but really thinking about opportunities, really drawing from what you just shared on those that are potentially interested in home-based daycares, which we think at the department could solve really two issues. One, expanding childcare availability, and for those that need childcare to go to work, and also creating an entrepreneurial opportunity for those that want to start their center. So did you look at any of that sort of in the report about how those two things don't necessarily have to be disparate, but how expanding childcare availability can help those go to work, and then also help those who seek to start their own daycares?
Yes, thank you, Commissioner. I don't think we got quite as far into the entrepreneurial side of that question. There definitely is a focus on illustrating how, a number of people aren't able to go to work because they can't get childcare, and the importance of that for just the overall economy and for the businesses looking for people to join their workforce. So those aspects are definitely covered in the report. I do think some of the specifics of small, entrepreneurial, home-based was something we could have gone a little farther into, but generally speaking, it kind of, we're talking about the businesses overall, childcare businesses, whether they be small or large, that encouraging those businesses to develop is important.
Just a quick follow-up. I think the notion about the development district is a pretty powerful one, but I also think having fairly concise onboarding information to help those that may be interested would be critical, because sometimes it's really hard to navigate how all of it works, specifically if there's someone who purely just has an interest, to perhaps maybe make it a little bit easier on what exactly needs to be done to be able to accomplish that. So I just wanted to note that for the record.
Sure, Commissioner, and I would follow up. The department's pre-licensing unit is really is dedicated to working with those people from that first phone call, and that's something that our focus groups, our interviews, hearing from the providers, their praises and difficulties working with pre-licensing. It's something we've talked about with DHS to look at ways to keep that, keep improving that. I think it's something that would be worked out with, the more feedback and further discussion, but it is something that they place an emphasis on.
Are there other questions, members? All right. Let me just say one thought. It's more of an opinion than anything else. In years past, childcare was considered maybe a luxury. It is not. It's a necessity. I see that every day. I hear it every day from constituents, as I'm sure others in this room do. So I appreciate your work on it. We're going to certainly try to look at making some of these recommendations into reality. If there's no other questions, we'll take a vote. Those in favor of approval, say aye. Those opposed, nay. Carries. Thank you. Thank you very much for a very good report. And thank you, members, for some very good commission. All right. I'll call your attention to the section Senate Bill 2487. It'd be tab 7. House Bill 2616, School-Based Services and TennCare Reimbursement. And this, again, is a final report for approval. Dr. Matt Owen, our Director of Policy, will make the presentation. And I look down, I look up, you've already slipped in there. Okay. I will, in order to get us started, I will move approval. The Vice Chair will second. And are there, you are recognized for your report. And then we'll take questions.
Of course.
I'm very optimistic about your report. I actually entertained approval before I heard a word you said.
Well, I'm happy to sit down if you prefer.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning, members. The final report on school-based services and TennCare reimbursement for your approval today was prepared in response to a request from Senator Lundberg, Representative White, and Representative Sherrill. Having been made aware of an unresolved contract issue that was preventing a school district from seeking reimbursement from TennCare for health services provided to students who are covered by the program, they sent a letter to Chairman Yeager requesting that the commission review the problem and assist the parties in reaching a resolution. And you can find that study request in Appendix A. Stakeholders, including TennCare, have agreed that a contract addendum for managed care organizations to use with school districts could help resolve the issues that have been raised, and TennCare has committed to exploring the creation of a contract addendum with the MCOs. TennCare and the MCOs would then test the feasibility of this addendum with Knox County Schools, and depending on the results of that test, TennCare could consider whether to make use of that addendum a requirement for MCOs when contracting with school districts. Because TennCare's proposed course of action aligns with what Commission staff would have recommended, the report, in lieu of a formal recommendation, includes the statement that the Commission supports the development of a contract addendum for MCOs to use with school districts, and you can find that on page 2. In terms of changes that we made since presenting the draft, we have incorporated updates from TennCare into the report. These are the same updates that we discussed in December, specifically that TennCare has now met with both Knox County Schools and Blue Care, one of the state's MCOs. Blue Care has taken feedback from those meetings and has drafted a contract addendum for schools that is currently undergoing Blue Care's internal legal review. Blue Care anticipates being able to share that addendum with Knox County once its review is complete. And you can find those updates highlighted in yellow in the report on pages 2 and 11. With that, I am happy to take any questions you might have before seeking your final approval. Thank you.
Well, thank you for such a succinct report. We appreciate that and the work that TennCare and the Blues are doing on this issue. Do you have any questions for our presenter members? There being none, the motion's already on the floor to approve. Those in favor say aye. Opposed, nay. Carries. Thank you very much. This, you know, as Dr. Lippard mentioned earlier, we ought to have more of these meetings the day after a special session. We want to get out of here. Yeah, okay. Thank you very much. I will call your attention now to Public Chapter 937, Acts of 2024, Youth Vaping, a final report. Ms. Arzate, Jennifer Arzate, our Senior Research Associate, will make the presentation, and I would call your attention to tab 8. Ms. Arzate, you are recognized for your presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Once again, good morning, Commission members. My name is Jennifer Arzate, and I'll be presenting on the Commission's final report on youth vaping for your approval. You can find the copy of this report under tab 8. This report was prepared in response to Public Chapter 937, Acts of 2024, which directed the Commission to study the effects of vaping and the use of all vapor products by persons under 21. This study was to include initiation of vapor product usage, health outcomes, enforcement of underage sales, best practices to address usage on school grounds, taxation, and the access to cessation products and services. The Act also directed the Commission to identify the prevalence of vaping among the under 21 population, including demographic and usage trends. Following the presentation of the draft report, staff added the following, though it does not require any changes to the recommendations. During the December 2024 Commission meeting, on the recommendation that the General Assembly establish licensing for vapor product retailers, other approaches were raised by Commission members, including disciplining businesses failing to comply with vaping regulations through their beer permits, and authorizing local governments to establish vapor product boards to handle licensing and violations similar to existing beer boards. Additionally, staff of the Tennessee Department of Health say vapor product retail licensing should also include tobacco products and any other product that contains nicotine. The 4 recommendations from the final report remain unchanged. Representatives of convenience store owners say that when universal carding was enacted for carry-out beer purchases in Tennessee in 2006, it reduced underage access to beer by 1/4. They say it helps deter underage purchases by taking the judgment call of who to card away from the clerk. Because of its potential to reduce the sale of vapor products to persons under the age of 21, The report recommends that the General Assembly require vapor product retailers to check the identification of all purchasers regardless of age, or in other words, universal carding. States with a licensing requirement for vapor product retailers tend to have lower rates of youth vaping, and licensing could help the state's existing inspectors better enforce age restrictions by identifying more vapor product retailers. Revenue generated from licensing fees could be used to prevent underage sales of vapor products, and both health advocates and pro-vaping stakeholders are supportive. For these reasons, the report recommends that the General Assembly establish licensing for vapor product retailers. Prevention and cessation programs for youth vaping are effective, according to research, but many counties in Tennessee lack such programming, especially cessation programming, in part because of a lack of funding. So to combat youth vaping, the report recommends that the General Assembly increase consistent and recurring funding for the Tennessee Department of Health's Tobacco Use Prevention and Control Program to expand existing prevention and cessation efforts in Tennessee. School districts collect discipline data, but reports to the Tennessee Department of Education don't specify these offenses. More detailed discipline data would provide policymakers with better information on which substances are being abused most often, where to focus enforcement, prevention, and cessation efforts, and to aid future research. The report recommends that the Tennessee Department of Education require school districts to report more specific substance abuse information, including vaping offenses, in their annual discipline reports. This concludes my presentation. I am happy to answer any questions you may have. Otherwise, I request approval for this final report.
I'll go ahead and move approval, and Vice Chair will second, and we'll entertain questions. Are there questions from the members? Questions from the members? I did take the liberty of sending your report to Judge Scarlett Ellis, who is the General Sessions Judge in Scott County, who takes a great interest in vaping. I've been in her office for hours listening to her concerns about the lax enforcement of this issue. And just for the record, I'm not asking you to make a change, but I do want it in the record. She did write, after she read your report, the only comment she offered was that she thought we ought to take a second look at pages 10 to 12, where it says the vaping is less harmful than smoking, but still harmful. That technically is accurate, but she felt like that may be somewhat misleading, because we don't in any way want to minimize the harm that is the harm of vaping. Representative Parkinson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think you make a great point, but I want to ask, where did we reference that information from? Where did it come from, that statement in particular?
Yes, there are various research articles that we were able to reference in that specific excerpt. But once again, we do want to take into account that this is research specifically for the short and medium-term health effects that are produced by vaping, and not like the long-term effects, which is something that we are still continuously researching.
Correct.
One more question, Representative. We have some people waiting.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. And maybe this is a question that should be directed to you, Mr. Chair. If that information is accurate, but we don't want to send the wrong signal, maybe we just remove that excerpt period from the report, but if that's the will, or you think that's what should be done, because it is accurate according to the report, but I understand also that it may send the wrong signal. Thank you, sir.
I would probably, if I may, and thank you, Representative, if I may, I'd like to hear from Ms. Arzadi. I think you were talking about that this was maybe reference. What's your opinion about the request here? You're telling me that the long-term effects are still being studied, and we'll have another report on that? Oh. Okay.
No, sir. Just stating that long-term effects of vaping are still being studied in general, and research is ongoing. However, available research to us now says that the short-term and medium-term effects are still harmful, but less harmful than smoking traditional tobacco products.
All right, yes, Mayor. And, excuse me, I'm sorry. Mayor Frank was ahead of you, if you don't mind. She is my neighbor in Anderson County, so.
Just real quickly, Mr. Chairman, thank you. I just wanted to note that our Anderson County Board of Commissioners raised this topic on their own, and so I did share the full draft report with them and got a lot of positive feedback on some of the draft recommendations at that point in time. So there is local concern. I just wanted to make a note of that.
Thank you.
Okay, well, all right, that's a fine comment. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for the report. I think it is an incredibly important topic as both a father and a grandfather. I'm keenly interested in the recommendations, especially the licensing and the universal carding. I think it's incredibly important. I will tell you that I serve on the board of an organization that's fighting this in Bradley County, ATS The Bridge, and I did forward to Dr. Lippard the comments. I hope they got to you as well. It's 3 or 4 recommendations of changes or at least updates to some of the verbiage, and I would be remiss for not bringing up on page 2 the sentence at the bottom of the first paragraph is the one that ATS, Advocacy Through Students, had the most challenge with. It simply reads, only those who fully switch from smoking could potentially benefit from vaping. And the concern was there is medically, scientifically, absolutely no benefits to vaping of any kind. In fact, it is now being studied and could be worse than smoking, especially if we don't know the licensed products that are in these vapes. And that one sentence at the bottom of the paragraph, page 2, is the one that they had the most difficulty allowing it to stand, because in the eyes of this very effective board that speaks to thousands of students every year, they said that there's absolutely no potential benefit to vaping of any kind. And so I would like to enter that into the record. Thank you.
If there's no objection, I want Dr. Lippard to comment on this. We've had some very valid points that have made that are concerning, and the last thing you want to do is put off the report if we can vote for it. But I think personally, vaping is the bane of our youth. It is, and the vaping environment. And I don't want to do anything that would even indirectly cause us to think that we're in any way condoning or supporting this. Dr. Lippard.
So, of course, this is the commission's report, and if the commission is uncomfortable with that language, the most expedient thing to do would be to strike that sentence from the final report. We could approve the report on the condition that that sentence is struck. Again, according to our research, it's not technically incorrect, but I can understand the concern with the way it's worded. We could alternately change the wording from see a benefit to something more reduce the potential harm, or again, the most expedient thing to do would be just to strike the sentence if that's the will of the commission.
Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would move to strike it. I think the paragraph stands without that last sentence.
All right, there's a motion to, what's the page? Direct me to the page again, please.
Certainly, it's first paragraph, page 2, last sentence.
I'm sorry, there's a second here. If you members will tolerate me here, I'm trying to find the page here. Where I lost it.
It's beyond this. It's keep going.
Go on. All right. Thank you for your tolerance, members. I'm still struggling here with all these papers.
A lot of papers.
That's all right. Well, I hear we.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I understand our apprehension to, promoting or unseemingly or inadvertently rather, making vaping seem good. However, I would ask that, is it possible, if this information is factual, I think it's important that, the TACIR body, they put a lot of work into doing these reports. And if the information is factual, is it possible to approve the report along with the TACIR body comments speaking to, these points in particular? Or maybe some type of note that comes with the approval of the body versus, adjusting factual information in the report, if that makes sense.
We, of course, could do that, Representative Parkinson. I think the issue with this particular sentence is the word potentially is doing a pretty heavy lift. And the fact that the short and midterm research shows potentially less, but we being scientists don't know the long-term effects yet, and that's the word potential. So I think it would still, I don't think it takes anything away from the report to strike the sentence.
Did that satisfy your representative? So I believe you had made a motion. There was no second on a substitute motion? Is that what you? Oh, well, we misinterpreted. All right, thank you. All right. All right. Are there other questions on the motion? I believe we have a motion to. All right. The question's been raised. Those in favor of approving the motion, say aye. Opposed, nay. Carries. Now, help me here, Madam. I'm still concerned about Judge Ellis's comments at vaping, where she makes a reference to a quote from between pages 10 to 12. I pardon for the broad reference there, but the vaping is less harmful than smoking, but still harmful. Now, the judge says that is an accurate statement, but she thinks that's somewhat misleading. How can we fix that?
That would be similar to the sentence that we just discussed on the potential benefits being, or potential harms being less than traditional tobacco cigarettes. So that would be up to the commission.
I'm not sure I understand your answer, and I'm sure it's me, not you.
So that is a similar sentence to what we just discussed on page 2.
Right, here we go again. All right. I believe I'm referring to a comment on page 11. Is that right? The Vice Chairman is capable. Once again, help the chair.
It's the Deputy Chair Medical Officer of England. It's the sub-paragraph that's indented.
Where is it? Right here.
That's right there, first sentence. Vaping is substantially less harmful than smoking.
I'd like to hear a discussion on that. I'm just troubled with that. Yes, Mayor.
I would suggest that the narrative in the paragraphs covers the points that you're trying to make, and that by simply changing the heading to say vaping is still harmful or vaping is harmful, that you take away that indication that it may be less harmful. But the narrative says what the true research is, but you have a strong heading that says what your concerned person says.
I'm going to very boldly take your comment as a motion that we change that vaping is still harmful. Is that what you said? Yes, sir. All right, and I'll second that if there's no objection to the chair seconding. And I know Senator Yarborough is waiting for the floor, but let's hear a discussion of that.
I think it's fine to change the heading. I was just going to highlight the fact that, I think there's a lot of detail here, and there is a call out on this page where we've got the Commissioner of Health saying, because I do think people make this comparison, and he makes the comparison to this is like jumping off. It's like comparing jumping off the 45th floor of the building to the jumping off the 50th floor of the building.
I understand.
I think we're highlighting that this is still a danger in the text of the report, and covering
And
that in an important
I understand
way.
your point, and I agree with it, but I think that the mayor's motion just strengthens that position. All right, we're going to vote on it. Those in favor of the motion say, Senator Campbell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just wanted to say one thing about that, and that is that a lot of times people take sentences out of these reports to justify, all kinds of things. And so,
Every day.
So I respect the speaker or the chairman for trying to be cognizant of the fact that people might decontextualize this.
Are there other questions or comments before we vote on the motion?
Can we clarify the sentence, what the new heading would say?
He wants to hear it. The chairman wants to hear it again.
My suggestion was simply to say vaping is either still harmful or vaping is harmful. The still is the one that you had repeated.
Yeah, I said still
so-
harmful. Is there an objection to that? All right, okay. That's what it is. Does that answer your question, sir? All right, now may we vote? Those in favor say aye. Opposed, nay. Carries. Thank you. And thank you. And, I may have spoke too soon about getting out of here quickly. I don't know. Dr. Lippert.
Just a inquiry, have we approved the report? We've approved the 2 changes.
No, we haven't yet. We're getting there. All right. These were motions, these were amendments, so the principal motion is still to approve as amended. Are we ready to vote on that? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. It carries. Thank you, madam. Thank you very much, and thank you, Dr. Lippert. All right, let's see here. Let's go to the biennial, let's see, tab 9, a biennial report for years 22, 23, and 23, 24. Final for fiscal years, 23 and 24. And this is for approval too. I think Ms. Hannah Newcomb, our research associate, will bring the report. Ms. Newcomb, you are recognized, madam.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Commission members. As stated, this is the biennial report on the Commission's work for fiscal years 2022-23 and 2023-24. The report is being submitted for your approval, and it can be found behind tab 9. The report's content is likely familiar to all of you. It summarizes the work the Commission has done over the last 2 years, and the appendices include information on some of the reports completed, such as information provided to the Commission and presentations completed by staff, among other things. The main body of the report gives an overview of the issues that the Commission has focused on in the past 2 fiscal years. These include the topics of personal property tax, state grants to local governments, Tennessee's waterways, childhood obesity, electric vehicles, reference-based pricing in healthcare, litter and illegal dumping, passenger rail, solar development and property rights, safety and security at colleges and universities, alcohol regulation and the hospitality industry, housing affordability, and infrastructure needs. If there are any questions, I would be happy to take them. Otherwise, that is the biennial report.
Are there questions, members? I don't think so. Chair to entertain a motion to approve from Senator Yarborough. There's a second. Chair, yes, thank you. Any further comment or questions? Those in favor of the motion to approve, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Yeah. If you really, she reviewed the list of the issues that we've looked at. Very impressive. This group does a lot of good work. Very impressive. All right, let's see. We now have a panel discussion. We now have a panel discussion for us here. It would be tab 10, Public Chapter 941, the Acts of 2024, real estate fraud. We have a panel. I believe Carly is it Sickle? Am I saying that right, or Sickle? Sickle, I apologize. Van Sickle, our senior research associate. I will defer to you to introduce the members. I would say I believe all of the members. Was it 5 minutes? All right, well, good. That'll give me time to make some short remarks. I believe we've already talked to all of our panel members to encourage you that of the importance of brevity, and we'd ask you to keep your remarks to 5 minutes. And to the members, we do want your questions, but we will wait till all the panelists have completed and then take questions. And we will call it to your attention should you inadvertently exceed the time limit. Miss Sickle, Miss Sickle, we will wait for you to tell us when you're ready. That could be me.
Are you dialing 9 to get out first? Oh, is it 8 now?
Say something. We don't happen to have an AT&T lobbyist here, do we? Another bad, failed attempt. Well, not, it wasn't failed. All right, there we go. Members, as she begins to introduce the panel, I have to leave the room for just a few minutes, and Vice Chairman Kevin's going to take over and take the meeting for us. Mr. Vice Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You're recognized, ma'am.
Good morning, Commissioners. Sorry for the technical difficulties. In 2021, real estate and rental fraud in the United States resulted in a staggering $1.9 billion in losses. The recent attempt to steal Graceland has highlighted the issue of real estate fraud, particularly in Tennessee and across the nation. Real estate fraud involves deceptive practices during property transactions, often involving one party providing false information or withholding facts, leading to financial loss for another party. A common scheme is quitclaim deed fraud, where vulnerable populations are either tricked into transferring their property over to scammers or the property is acquired through forgery. Quitclaim deeds are legal documents used to transfer ownership from one party to another, frequently among family members. Unlike warranty deeds, which are used in property sales and offer buyers guarantees that the property is free and clear of liens, claims, and defects, quitclaim deeds do not provide such guarantees. Other types of real estate fraud can include rental scams, wire frauds, and fraudulent mortgage schemes. In response to these concerns, Senate Bill 2448 by Senator Akbari and House Bill 2215 by Representative Parkinson was introduced in the General Assembly last year. Initially, the bill required county registers of deeds and notary publics to verify the identity of a person recording or notarizing documents related to certain real estate transactions using a government-issued ID. However, the Senate State and Local Government Committee amended the bill to require the Commission to complete a study on real estate fraud in Tennessee. The General Assembly passed the amended bill, which became Public Chapter 941, Acts of 2024. The act directs the Commission to study the prevalence of real estate fraud in Tennessee, the different schemes used to perpetrate real estate fraud, the methods used by other states to combat real estate fraud, and the best practices for local government officials in registering documents related to real estate transactions. A draft report for review and comment will be presented at the Spring 2025 Commission meeting. The final report will be presented at the Summer 2025 Commission meeting. Today, the Commission will hear from the following panelists who are knowledgeable about the issue. Thomas Cronkright, who's on the phone, co-founder and executive chairman of Certified ID. Holly Hemrich, Sumner County Register of Deeds, president of the Middle Tennessee Registers Association and legislative committee member of the Tennessee Registers Association. Tabitha King, co-owner of Authority Title and Escrow and 2024 president of the Tennessee Land Title Association, with Shanita Baker, vice president, Mid-South Strategic Growth Director of Fidelity National Financial and president-elect of the Tennessee Land Title Association, and Kelly Groover, senior assistant attorney general, Tennessee Attorney General's Office. Additionally, Brooke Merritt, Senior Manager of Policy Planning at the National Notary Association, was invited to speak at the meeting but was unable to attend. She has instead submitted a written statement on the issue of real estate fraud. A copy of her written statement is included in the tab. And as mentioned before, each panelist will have 5 minutes. We have two that are combined, so that we have a little more time leniency there, but we ask you to hold all questions until the end. And Thomas, if you can hear, whenever you're ready, you can begin.
Syndicate of what is one of the most prolific cybercrime organizations known as the Nigerian Black Axe. At the time of our incident, they were responsible for over $5 billion in actual attempted fraud in North America. I was a victim of a cybercrime that's now known as business email compromise. And business email compromise, or BEC as it's referred to, is one of the most commonly used scams to defraud participants in real estate transactions and follows a very methodical flow where bad actors leverage publicly available information. That's information easily found online on properties and multiple listing information to send links with the purpose of infiltrating someone's email account of a trusted party. Once in an email account, they'll obtain private and contemporaneous information and then use that information to essentially weaponize it using tech-enabled social engineering scams, impersonating a trusted party in a transaction, and then tricking someone else into sending funds into an account that they believe is going to a trusted party, let's say a law firm or a title company escrow account, when in fact it's a bank account controlled by the bad actor. This type of crime in real estate accounted for just $9 million in loss, not to minimize that number, in 2015, but has scaled to $446 million last year, according to the FBI's Internet Crime Complaint Center's annual report. The concern is that every transfer is at risk. The theft of buyer earnest money deposit and cash to close funds are now averaging $80,000 per incident. Impersonation of sellers to profit from the sale of properties that they don't actually own. This was previously referenced by Ms. Van Sinkle. That's ranging right around $200,000 per incident. And they're even directing and manipulating mortgage payoff statements so that title companies, when they go to pay off an existing mortgage of a seller, they're diverting those wire transfers. That's averaging about $300,000 per incident. My experience led me to create essentially a technology that performs identity verification, authenticates wiring instructions, and provides a level of insurance to protect everyone in the transaction. This is something that really came out of our intimate experience with not only the crime, but the bad actors involved. Since Certified was formed, we're being used by about 1,200 title companies, a little more than that across the country, over 80 in the state of Tennessee. Last year, we protected about $131 billion in real estate funds, about $500 billion since we started. And it's really meant to provide a multi-layered approach and combat technology with technology for good. Unfortunately, best practice hasn't caught up with the scammers that continue to invest in their craft. And those residing in Tennessee continue to suffer losses. Regina Smith in Memphis last year lost $60,000. Her first reaction, which was the reaction of so many that lose their life savings in an instant, was to have a very emotional experience. And I've been victimized, so I can relate to that. Working with us in our partnership with United States Secret Service Global Investigative Operations Center in Washington, we were able to return those funds to her. Similarly, Ritu Thurani of Nashville lost tens of thousands in her real estate closing. She had worked several jobs for years in order to save up the money to afford her first home. When she uncovered the incident, or the incident was uncovered to her, she called multiple times a day to her bank, sleepless nights for almost a week. And with, again, our help and the help of the U.S. Secret Service, law enforcement, was able to have a successful outcome for her. But this is the story of so many people, and it's just unacceptable. We take hundreds of calls like this a year. We have a fraud recovery services hotline that we staff literally 7 days a week. In a recent survey of 1,500 homeowners, buyers and sellers that were recently in a transaction, 1 in 4 were targeted for some form of fraud during the closing process, and 1 in 20 became victims. Tennessee had a slightly higher rate of incident. The national average was just under 5%, and in Tennessee, it's just over 7%. Consumers are looking for their professionals to protect them. They understand the importance of real estate. They understand the dream and promise of home ownership. 79% of those respondents in both Tennessee and the rest of the U.S. are willing to pay more to work with a real estate agent or a title company that prioritizes security. To put it at scale, I just did some researching while I was waiting here. The residents of Tennessee last year in the FBI's report reported just under 8,500 instances of cybercrime, with an aggregate loss reported of over $161 million, placing Tennessee 20th among the other states.
Sir, if you can draw to a conclusion.
We believe, 2 more points. We believe this will continue unless change is effected. There are several macro forces at play that tend to run towards the benefit of those bad actors. Law enforcement is just completely under-resourced, and even large single incident cases have to be extremely large to be able to get prosecutorial commitment for get investigative resources to flow. So it's almost like a death by paper cut, even though that paper cut is the life savings or business liquidity of a business. Banks do not have a standardized process to assist victims, and there's no, I would say, defined process of sharing critical information and timely information due to the Bank Secrecy Act. These crimes are incredibly effective. They're carried out by global crime syndicates, and they have fully operationalized their business models. But there is a way to think about the problem differently, and we're working with several states on a framework. A part of the framework is making sure that everyone in a real estate transaction has been proofed from an identity standpoint. Are we really dealing with the property owner? Is it actually the title company that the buyer is sending the funds to? Providing a secure means of sharing wiring instructions or sending funds and communicating the initiation and receipt of those funds. And ensuring stopgaps such as insurance, incident response, and other types of coverages that leave people more vulnerable. And then lastly, I would say a state mandated, and I would say this for every state, disclosure to consumers about wire fraud. If we have to disclose property conditions and lead-based paint and other things, why not disclose the fact that their life savings could be at risk if they enter into this very important transaction that they'll only do a few times in their life. So with that, thank you for your time.
Thank you. Can we keep you on the line for questions at the end?
Of course, I'll stay on.
Okay, thank you.
You're recognized.
Thank you. Good morning, and thank you again for giving me the opportunity to address this important issue that affects so many lives across Tennessee. The Register of Deeds is responsible for recording, maintaining, and providing access to public records related to real estate transactions and other important documents, such as deeds, mortgages, liens, plats, etc. Our primary duty is to ensure that these documents are accurately recorded and indexed for public reference. However, it is important to understand that the Register of Deeds does not determine the legality of the documents submitted. Our role is strictly administrative, meaning we record documents as they are presented, provided that they meet the basic statutory requirements for recording, such as proper formatting, fees, necessary signatures, and making sure those signatures and notaries are original. We do not verify the authenticity, accuracy, or legal effect of any document. Additionally, we are not responsible for verifying the identity of the individuals submitting documents. While certain legal documents may require notarization, it is the responsibility of the notary public or other appropriate parties to verify identities before submission. Our office does not investigate the legitimacy of transactions or ensure that they comply with legal agreements. That responsibility falls on the individuals involved, their attorneys, and other legal professionals. Our function is to provide an impartial, transparent, and accessible public records system, ensuring that documents are recorded in accordance with the law, while leaving legal disputes and concerns to the appropriate legal authorities. In Tennessee, we take great pride in our property rights and the security of homeownership. Yet fraudsters have found a way to exploit weaknesses in the property systems. For example, these criminals may forge a deed, transfer ownership to themselves or a third party, and then sell or mortgage the property without the true owner's knowledge. In many cases, victims are unaware of the fraud until it is too late. When they receive foreclosure notices, they find a lien on their property, or they discover that their home has been sold without their consent. This type of fraud often targets seniors, absentee or vacant landowners, and individuals with investment properties. Advances in technology have made it easier for criminals to access public records and forge official documents. In Tennessee, property ownership records are publicly available, and while transparency is essential for the functioning property market, it also creates an opportunity for fraudsters. Additionally, many individuals are unaware of how to protect themselves from these scams, making them vulnerable targets. Electronic filing is part of the advances in technology that have come with some unintended consequences. While making recording easier for most companies, this has also opened a door for criminal activity if not monitored correctly. Before a document can be filed in the Register of Deeds office, it must come through an electronic filing vendor. We may look for a certain recording requirement. This does not prevent against fraudulent copy and paste jobs. We have proposed a bill that hopefully you will see soon that will narrow down who can electronically file a document. The purpose of this is to eliminate single individuals from filing fraudulent copy and paste jobs, as well as creating a vetting process for e-file vendors to follow. Unfortunately, we also have seen paper documents such as the Graceland document that have come across several counties. And with that have been prepared fraudulent, it was either by forging signatures, forging notaries not properly identifying signatures. Tennessee has laws in place to address property fraud, including severe penalties for forgery and fraudulent transfer of property. However, enforcement can be challenging due to the sophisticated tactics used by criminals. Local law enforcement and district attorneys often rely on property owners to recognize and report fraud, which sometimes can underscore the importance of public education. Preventing property fraud requires proactive approach measures from both the public and private sectors, along with potential future legislation. Some key strategies that we have in place or that could be future in place are monitoring property records. Currently, right now, homeowners can subscribe for free property alert systems at their Register of Deeds office. Title insurance, require background checks of notaries and auditing of local notaries. Educate the public and prioritize property fraud criminal prosecution. To combat property fraud in Tennessee, we must act collectively. I urge you to explore new legislative measures to strengthen our property systems in the private sectors. I encourage local officials to expand in fraud monitoring programs and invest in technology that secures public records if you don't already. And I call on each of you to remain vigilant, protect your property, and report suspicious activity to the appropriate authorities. Together, we can ensure that Tennessee remains a place where property ownership is safe, secure, and protected. Let us take a stand against property fraud and safeguard the hard-earned investments of our citizens. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I believe next we have Tabitha Key and is it Shanita? Shanita Baker. I think you're doing together. So if you would, we'll start with Tabitha, who's first on the list. So I'll refer to you.
All right. Good morning, Honorable Chairman and members of the General Assembly. I'm Tabitha King, and I'm currently serving as the president of the Tennessee Land Title Association, and I'm also a title company owner. So I co-owner of Authority Title and Escrow. So this topic really hits home for me, both personally and professionally. So today we're going to just share with you some of the real-life examples that we deal with on a daily basis of cyber fraud in our industry and how these cyber criminals are infiltrating the closing process.
Okay. Good morning. Thank you for having us this morning. I'm Shanita Baker. I am actually the president-elect of Tennessee Land Title Association and vice president and Mid-South Strategic Growth Director for F&F Family of Underwriters. It's the nation's largest title insurer, which is why we wanted to appear before you today, because we're so concerned about our consumers and some of the things that are happening in the real estate space. So just wanted to briefly show you some statistics. I think it's really important that we recognize that, you know, the fraud that's happening right now, it's really everyone's problem. If you own a home or you're intending to buy one, you could fall victim to cyber fraud. In my experience, working with, claims and so forth, it's been a really tough last 3 to 4 years. If you'll notice, in 2019, there were probably about $3.79 million in losses, and now we're up to $37.4 billion in losses across the United States. I personally have knowledge of instances right here in Middle Tennessee where some home buyers erroneously got wiring instructions for where they were to send their down payment for their homes, not knowing that it wasn't communication that came from their title insurance company. They wired the funds. The day of closing, they talk about, I've already sent you the money and it's never been received. And again, this is a concern. The most important investment that you can have is highly jeopardized.
So as you can see, the numbers just do not lie. The cyber criminals are targeting real estate transactions at an alarming rate. According to ALTA, which is the American Land Title Association's report, wire fraud attempts stayed the same or increased for 83% of our title agents in America. A cybercrime is reported every 39 seconds, and phishing attacks surged 27% in just 2 years. Even more concerning is that the victim losses skyrocketed by 72% related to business email compromises, and that's also something that Tom touched on. That totals $10.3 billion, which is equivalent to 30,000 homes that have been stolen. Because of these statistics, consumer awareness and clear communication between all parties, which is realtors, title companies, lenders, and clients, which are the consumers, it's you and I, aren't just important, they've got to become mandatory. Real estate remains the prime target, and we need the right precautions in place so that we can fight back. We're going to show you a little bit going forward on how these scams take place and how we can protect each other.
So what we really want to call your attention to is the sophistication of cyber fraud. You know, when it all started about 10 years ago, it was mostly business email compromise. Now it's become much more sophisticated, where realtors are actually, they're sort of trapped into Zillow listings that are fraudulent. They're reaching out to those folks, enlisting support for selling their homes, and don't know that they are dealing with people who are fraudsters. Last month, I had the personal experience of working with one of our East Tennessee title agents. That agent, in 1 week, lost $338,000 at the hands of a bad actor. The next week, the same bad actor appeared in another transaction with the same company. How bold. The only reason they were able to catch it, they were so good at, you know, looking at local driver's licenses for each state and replicating them in a manner that was very hard to detect. The only thing that caught this person was the second time they used the same picture on the driver's license from the previous week. Last week, it was an ID from the United Kingdom. The second time, it was actually a Georgia license. Again, it's very important to understand the sophistication that's happening, and most of these hijackers don't reside in this country. And it's important now that we all somewhat take a stand for this. All right, so I just want to touch briefly, I want to make sure that we're being brief, but the evolution of real estate fraud, where it started and where it's going, and why it's so important. So, you know, we've gone from simple emails that have been hijacked. We all got very cognizant of those because the language sometimes was not the way that we would speak in America. However, now there are so many things that are happening, and I want to call attention to a few very important areas. So sellers' proceeds, when they're wiring in money for the closing of their homes, those are being hijacked. Buyers' cash to close is gone. Mortgage payoffs are being hijacked. And you might ask, how can this possibly happen? Well, these bad actors, they lay dormant, oftentimes, you know, tricking someone into clicking on a link that's in an email that they receive. It could sit dormant for months. And basically what they're looking at is the opportunity for something to take place. Here's what they know. Real estate transactions involve a lot of money. Middle Tennessee has been specifically targeted because of our increase in home values. You know, when you stop to think about it, it could be the worst thing that happens in anyone's life. Seller impersonation on vacant land. So this is a situation where someone may own a home here in Tennessee and a second home in Florida or another place. they're identifying those folks from their residency, and they're attacking the properties that they're least likely to pay attention to. And at the end of the day, if someone doesn't have title insurance, there's no protection. There's really no coverage, even with closing lock and title lock and some of those things. They don't really help. Maybe they can provide notifications after the fact, but that's way too late.
So as Shanita said, these cyber criminals, you know, the way that they operate, their ultimate goal is diverting funds. So where it started with emails, it's now trickling over into every aspect of the real estate transaction. So diverting funds, the closing proceeds, loan payoffs, and commissions all basically start with a hacked email, whether that's coming from the realtor or the consumer that oftentimes doesn't have, you know, multi protections on their emails, as the title agents do. So once they gain access to that email exchange, they're just sitting back reading every detail of that transaction, and they wait for the busiest time, which is at closing, and then they strike, sending through a counterfeit email. It looks legitimate, tricking someone, normally the consumer, to get the money straight into the cyber criminal's hands. So it devastates the buyers, sellers, but it also places a heavy burden on us as title agents and the title companies, because not only are we clearing title and insuring someone's property and the interest they have in that property for them and their heirs, we're also now investigating every transaction, every email, which is a very heavy burden on even hiring new staff and the training that goes into that. So that's why, you know, we are advocating for more and more communication. Real estate fraud is a risk for everyone. It can happen to any of us. And it's not just a risk for industry professionals, it's a threat to every consumer, and it has life-changing consequences. Life savings, retirement funds, it can ruin their credit, financial instability, and all of that is an emotional loss. So also the title agents are facilitating all of that. When it comes to why it matters is that it impacts individuals and consumers, which affects the whole family and then our communities, right? So our call to action is to just keep everyone informed, educate all consumers. I feel like it's a public service announcement because there's so many different ways now that we're facing that these cyber criminals are just getting more sophisticated. So with that being said, you know, Shanita and I are very passionate about this industry and the consumers that we serve. You know, we've been doing this for a very long time, and, you know, we're committed to protecting them from the growing threat of the real estate fraud. We just can't do it alone as title agents. We need help from all aspects of the industry. I mean, the registrar's office, attorney generals, lenders. There's just so many moving parts in any real estate transaction. So together, we just want to make a difference. We thank you for allowing us to share this with you, and we feel that it's going to need a lot of attention and to bring a lot of awareness to this subject. Thank you so much for letting
You're quite
us.
welcome, and we'll ask Kelly Groover, the Senior Assistant Attorney General with the Tennessee Attorney General's Office, now for your presentation, ma'am.
Good morning. Thank you for having me speak today. I am in the office's Consumer Protection Division, and within that division, we have the Consumer Protection piece, which is the enforcement piece, as well as the Consumer Affairs piece, which is a clearinghouse for consumer complaints. And so they intake complaints from consumers from across the state, as well as consumers from out of state who maybe have come into contact with a Tennessee business. So they intake thousands of complaints a year, and so we have decent insight into what are the patterns going on in the state, what are the issues that consumers are having. The folks who have already spoken have already covered quite well some of the issues with, wire proceeds being intercepted, with titles being stolen, those types of things, and I am indeed very concerned about those issues. Those are massive losses for consumers. those are largely criminal matters, and my office, we have civil enforcement authority, and so we're somewhat limited in how we're able to pursue those things and often refer them out to criminal authorities. The problem from the criminal enforcement side is the bad actors are often really, really difficult to locate. When you have someone who's just a hacker and they have, spoofed an IP address and all those kinds of things to really cover their tracks, and you really have no idea where in the world they might be, they can be really, really difficult to track down. So it's really important for the criminal enforcement side that prosecutors are equipped with the technological tools and expertise that they need to make those connections. But it's because those bad actors are really, really difficult to track down at times that consumer education is hugely, hugely important. Not just for the consumers, but also for the licensed professionals that are involved in these transactions. So in our office, when we start becoming aware of trends of certain types of fraud, we often put out consumer alerts. Those go out as sort of a press release and can be shared on the news and across the internet, those types of things. But the professionals who are involved in these transactions, they're really the ones who have that direct point of contact with the consumer and have the ability to warn them about common scams, about things to be cautious of. And so it's really going to take not just government agencies, but also those licensed professionals who are part of that process day in and day out to really have those conversations with consumers so you can avoid things on the front end, because it's much easier to avoid the fraud on the front end than to try to deal with it on the back end. There are some additional complaints and patterns that we've seen in the office that have implications for people's title or for ownership of their home, and I do want to touch on some of those briefly. You all are likely aware there was some legislation passed a couple years ago dealing with the issue of service contracts being filed as a lien on property. So essentially a real estate agent getting sort of the right of first refusal of providing real estate services when the person decides to go and sell their home. So we've not been seeing those getting filed. However, there's sort of variations of that are coming along, where someone essentially is getting, a very small loan on the front end, and then with the promise of, I'll pay you some portion of the equity whenever I sell my home, and then there's something being filed on that property that's encumbering that title. So there's sort of some variations on that we're seeing now. Also seeing some issues with consumers who are at risk of foreclosure. They're struggling to pay their mortgage. People coming in and offering different solutions for that maybe the consumer isn't benefiting as much as they thought they were going to. So someone, for instance, saying, if you'll pass the title to me, I'll pay your mortgage for you. I'll let you continue to live in the home. So you can keep living there, but you don't have to worry about being foreclosed on. The consumer agrees to it. And then the rent gets raised considerably. The consumer can no longer afford to live there, and they end up losing their home anyhow. So we're seeing some things like that. Foreclosure rescue services as well. There are some federal rules around how you can charge for those services when you provide those, and we're not always seeing those being followed. So consumers in that situation definitely are very vulnerable. Senior adults are also extremely vulnerable. So when we talk about the deed theft, a senior adult is a very attractive target for that type of scammer, because oftentimes they've had their home a long period of time. There's a lot of equity in the home. So if they're doing that to try to extract the equity, there's a lot there to extract. A senior adult is more likely to be isolated, more likely to have cognitive difficulties, and also more likely for that home to maybe be vacant because that person is in some sort of long-term care nursing home, that kind of thing. And so senior adults are particularly vulnerable targets for these. I have several other things I could talk about, but I'm running out of time here, so thank you for having me.
Thank you very much, and thank you all panelists. I believe our panelists have concluded their presentations, and now we will take questions. I believe Representative Parkinson had asked for the floor. You're recognized, sir, for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Mr. Chair, I'm going to ask for your indulgence not to rush this conversation, because this is a very, very important conversation that we're about to have. And how I got to drafting this legislation. I had an 86-year-old woman who woke up to knocks on her door because and a lockbox being put on her door because an individual had fraudulently said he had a contract on her house and was selling the contract to real estate companies and title companies and others, and they were coming to inspect the house thinking that they had a legitimate contract on this house. Additionally, 4 years before, we were having a conversation with then Register Shalandra Ford because people were bringing fake quitclaims into the registrar's office and literally stealing someone's property. And I want to further qualify this. You know, we talk about the American dream, but the American dream is ownership of real estate, and that is where your generational wealth is built from. And so when these individuals, they steal these properties, they are literally stealing the possibility of generational wealth for generations to come. So not just that individual that's in ownership at that moment, but their children, grandchildren, and so on and so forth. I do want to ask this, you know, and thank you all for your presentation. We heard a lot about the cyber crimes, but we didn't hear a lot about, aside of Ms. Holly mentioning the things that are happening in the registrar's office. So a lot of the more simpler criminals are bringing fake or forged quitclaims to the Register of Deeds office and filing those claims. I do have a question for you. And I know you're not an investigative body, but why are we not mentioning or looking at the idea of requiring an ID when someone comes to register a property via quitclaim or putting a lien on a property? And the reason why I'm asking that is because not to make you an investigative agency, but when that owner finds out that their property has been quitclaimed, at least we have a starting place for an investigation if we are to capture the ID of the person that is actually registering that property. So why is there hesitation from the registers to do that?
Yes, and thank you again for your question. Basically, what we look at is we get deeds in several different ways. They don't just walk in. They submit them in either by mail or by e-filing. That would then fall back down on several different categories. You may be restricting, maybe looking at possible restrictions of who can prepare documents. Again, you're taking away property rights by doing that. But if you can restrict the preparation in some way, you could do that. I feel that a criminal is going to be a criminal, and they're going to find a way around that, either by mailing that in or by submitting it by e-file, which is the copy and paste job that we were talking about.
You can have a follow-up, Representative, but I believe we have someone waiting for a question,
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And respectfully, Holly,
Sure.
You know, I think that we should be doing everything in our possibilities to make it harder for those criminals, and not leaning on the idea that they're going to find another way. Of course, they're going to find a way, and we should find another way when they do that. And if we could find a way to ensure that the individuals that are filing these documents are ID'd every way through there, so that every step an ID is required, then it makes it easier for that individual whose property has been stolen to be able to find a line of you know, individuals that have had or held or had something to do with this transfer. And think about it from this standpoint. You, in your capacity, when these thefts happen, you can be implemented in it or tied to it because these individuals simply walked up or into the registrar's office and signed off on it, and you're involved in the title. Now you're tied to that crime. And so, but we got to get to the person that has the that information or that document in their hand and leave no gaps for them to be able to register or make this a legal instrument without them being ID'd. I just don't understand it. I'm sorry, and I apologize.
No, that's okay. That's okay. That's where we fall back on the notary. That's where we fall back on the notary. So we look for original signatures. Those original signatures are supposed to be backed and signed off by a notary. A notary public's responsibility is to make sure that that ID is who that person is. They're also supposed to make sure of what document. They're supposed to understand that document as well.
No,
So I do understand your concern, and trust me, it is our concern as well. We are very concerned about this and very passionate about this, and we are willing to work with whoever we need to get this problem taken care of.
Executive Huffman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a quick question. Cybersecurity insurance, do you all have cybersecurity insurance, and are you able to recover anything using the cybersecurity insurance policy? And I know with counties, the TCSA insurance pool, I don't believe provides cybersecurity insurance policies, but they'll help counties find a cybersecurity insurance policy. So I was just wondering if, when you're considering the losses, the mounting losses in this industry, have you been able to recover anything under a cybersecurity insurance policy?
I'd like to answer that question. What has happened during the time of evolution from when cyber fraud really started, there was wire fraud coverage and cyber insurance. But because the losses have become so large, there are so many exclusions now to those policies. So in order to really protect the consumer, many title agencies have to employ, wire fraud insurance. A service such as Mr. Cronkite was certified along with the insurance just to ensure that there really is coverage. I've seen personally myself working for a national title insurance company where, there was coverage. Someone thought they did. I'm going to reach back to them after I've lost my $250,000, and then there's a rider that excludes the coverage. So this is a very complex issue because there's so many facets that really have to be addressed.
Are there other questions?
Could I step into this conversation a second?
Yes, and then I think we have someone waiting with a question.
Okay, back to Representative Parkinson's comments. I believe that this could be solved, or at least the flow of fraudulent documents being introduced to Register of Deeds through proper identity proofing and credential analysis on the part of the notary. It's something that we're working on here in the state of Michigan. So I do believe, and I respect Holly's comments, that the Register of Deeds is inundated with multiple media where they're receiving the documentation. We don't want to prevent people's or stunt people's property rights, but at the same time, the notaries with technology that can mimic IDs that the human eye is just not trained to detect. We have to be able to provide further identity proofing of the physical individual and credential analysis, two terms in the state of Michigan that are defined in the Notary Act. Relative to cyber insurance quickly, cyber insurance was originally designed to protect network intrusion, data theft, reporting, and getting a company back online. It was never anticipated that social engineering, especially tricking a consumer out of their life savings, would be covered under a policy because they struggle to underwrite those criteria at scale. So the most that we're able to get in the industry, and I'll speak to this as a large title owner in Michigan, is $250,000 of direct wire fraud coverage. And that's money that is sent out of an escrow account. There's no protection for lawsuits by consumers that are tricked outside of a system. And even to attach yourself, as was mentioned by Shanita, you have to do 52 different things in the policy. And if you did 50 out of 52, they just simply deny it. So thank you.
Yes, I believe Mayor Frank is next. I think Mr. Peach is in the queue to be, and Senator Campbell. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And real quickly, I think, Holly, you might be one of the only ones to address this, but under the scope of the public chapter for this study, one of the things discussed is perhaps best practices for local government in registering documents. One of the things that we experience in local government is when there are delinquent tax sales and properties come into possession of the county, then we go either to an auction or it's advertised in the newspaper through the whole legal process for selling that property. One of the things that we have come up against is we have been advised that legally there is no way we can force the registering of the deed to the buyer. And there have been occasions where individuals have openly stated in my office and with my assistant, we have no intention of registering the deed, which therefore leaves that property in the name of Anderson County in the Register of Deeds office. We've had an instance where an individual had liens on himself that were filed, and so he's legally using this mechanism to avoid notice, and then he's using the property to generate rents. In one particular case, the individual, I ran a report with our local law enforcement, the number of times law had appeared, whether it was the SWAT team, overdoses, you know, they're basically using this as a place to house the vulnerable or the criminal, and they're making money. And at the end of it all, Anderson County is responsible for that property once they vacate. This has also happened with individuals who have no intention of registering. Of course, then the taxes, once they become delinquent again, then it comes back to us. But they intentionally do not pay the taxes, and it's just a nice legal money-making scheme that leaves the county vulnerable.
Yes, we recently have seen, and like I said again, I don't know that it's going to stop a criminal from doing this, but we've recently seen clerk and master's reports coming in. They used to put the property into the county's name by deed. Now they're filing these clerk and master reports that have the individual properties and the delinquent tax owner on there. That kind of just hinders that. So that way, if loan agencies or anybody tries to come in and try to get property or loans off this vacant property, that would kind of stop things. But as far as what your concerns, I apologize for that. That's awful. That just shows a criminal will do anything. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I am an owner of a title agency as well, and so I can tell you there's been some sleepless nights when it comes to especially the wire fraud, those types of issues. And I do appreciate TLTA and Ms. Baker. I think we were even supposed to meet recently, but I was able to meet. But I appreciate all that you do. I'm anxious for this report because I believe the rise and the things that FinCEN's dealing with, it's only going to continue to get worse, and a lot of innocent people are going to get caught up in it. And I do appreciate Mr. Cronkite's company was certified and closing lock and those types of things. But even that can become very expensive for small business owners just to stop crime. And so I hope that the state gets involved. Obviously, with what we're dealing with, the federal government really needs to be involved because we're dealing with international players on this. And then my only last comment, and then I'll be quiet. Mr. Parkson, was following up what you were discussing. I know that the clerks probably would not like to have the extra stuff, but when people are sending in those deeds or appearing, they would need to make a copy of that driver's license or provide a copy of the driver's license before they would file it, because I know that they may be depending on the notary, but besides that can be a problem at times, which shouldn't be, but can be. But if it's a fake notary and they've ordered a seal, then you don't have a real name to go to. And so that would be a valuable thing to require that. You wouldn't need it with electronic filing, because I agree with you, there should be a limited number of people that are being able to file, and I think that's easier to take care of. Those are my comments. I'm anxious for this.
Thank you, Mr. Peach. Senator Campbell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a quick question for which you may or may not know the answer. If you could identify a single point of contact for a client in which you could have the most effect of warning a client in all of these, different players in this process, what would that be?
I think totally finding a trusted title agent, because we follow Alta's best practices, and we go through all the avenues to verify identity and protect those funds. And once something, like Mr. Parkinson, if it happens, you're going to find that out on a title search. And if the person that it happened to has a title policy, that just gives you another avenue for protection on that. So definitely a good closing agent.
And Tab, I'd like to add to that as well, too. I also think that it's a collective responsibility, starting with the real estate agent, ensuring that they're vetting out any title companies that they refer their customers to, but also that they allow those professionals to handle any NPI, personal information, instead of it being sent to them. Because over the last few years, we've had a number of realtors hacked simply because they don't use a company email system that has a two-factor authentication, and their email gets duped, and then now they know all the information about these potential buyers of homes. So I think it starts there, and collectively we all have to work together and ensure that there's excellence in every aspect of the transaction.
Thank you. Are there other questions? Representative Parkinson, I cut you off earlier. Do you have one? You want to bring the curtain down with one brief question?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I would drop the mic, but it's connected to something, so I can't drop it. But thank you. And chain of custody is important here, and because and to my Senate colleague over here, she, it's not always an agent involved. Some of these incidents are simply a one-man show where no one else is involved, or a crooked notary or something like that. And but there has to be, in my estimation, there has to be a requirement for identification through the entire chain of custody to the last stop. And I think that would, at minimum, help that consumer to be able to track every individual involved. Now, what that looks like, whether it's electronic with Mr. Thomas and what he does, and also requiring an ID at the registrar's office, and requiring ID at the notary, but chain of custody, every single stop that's involved in that legal document, there has to be a way to track it, and that's my thoughts on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? There being been a very, very informative presentation, and really, candidly, an eye-opening presentation, and some really serious issues that the legislature needs to look at. Thank you very much. I think I'll call your attention now, members. Unless there's objection, the next item, tab 11, the rolling stock. This is a draft report for review and comment. I don't believe we'll take a vote on this one. And Ms. Presley Powers, our senior research associate, will make a presentation. You're recognized, ma'am.
Oh, never mind. Sorry. Good morning, members. My name is Presley Powers, and I am presenting the Tab 11 Rolling Stock Draft Report for review and comment. The report was prepared in response to Mayor Ryle's January 2024 request, which examines the challenges state and local governments face in acquiring vehicles such as fire trucks, salt trucks, and school buses. Interviews with over 30 Tennessee officials reveal significant cost increases and extensive procurement delays caused by global supply chain disruptions linked to the COVID-19 pandemic. These delays, coupled with rising costs, pose potential challenges to essential public services. These challenges are not unique to Tennessee and are affecting the nation as a whole.
Short of producing their own vehicles, a private EMS company based in Chattanooga has started buying transit vans and refitting them with necessary features to function as ambulances because it's faster and cheaper than ordering and waiting for chassis. Governments will generally have to make do and adapt using the resources and strategies already available to them. Fortunately, the Commission finds there are several strategies that can be implemented without action by the Tennessee General Assembly that government agencies can use to mitigate challenges. Some of these strategies include developing vehicle maintenance and replacement plans, leveraging fleet management software and GPS, repairing vehicles instead of replacing them, preparing contingency plans for leasing or renting, exploring alternative vehicles, and consolidating fleets. These strategies provide practical ways to adapt and ensure continued public service delivery amidst ongoing procurement difficulties. The final report will be presented at the spring 2025 meeting, and I would like to open the floor to questions and comments.
Do you have any questions, members? There being none, I'm sorry. I apologize. Yes, sir. You're recognized.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a quick comment. I really appreciate the work y'all have done on this. This is obviously a real problem, and as you pointed out, it's just not Tennessee. So again, quickly, just thank you for your work. I look forward. I've read this. I'm going to delve into it deeper. I'm going to reach out to you, but I appreciate the work, Director Clipper, and all the work your staff has done. Thank you.
You're quite welcome, Mayor. All right, are there other questions? There being none. Thank you very much for your report. We'll go now to item 12.
Thank you.
On the biennial report for fiscals 23 and 24, there was no, was that the one? I thought it was. All right, that we did not actually take the formal vote to approve the biennial report. While you're cooling your heels there, thank you, Mr. Page. And there, yeah, with a second, thank you. Any questions? There being none, of course. Those in favor say aye, and opposed nay. Carries. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning again. This is the draft report on DA staffing in municipal courts of concurrent jurisdiction, located behind tab 12 and being presented for your review and comment. This day was prompted by Senate Bill 2054 by Senator Jackson and House Bill 2205 by Representative Barrett in the 113th General Assembly from last year, which would have required cities with municipal courts of concurrent jurisdiction to fund at least one assistant district attorney, or ADA, for their DA and grant the DA sole discretion to determine whether the city needed to fund additional DA staff. Most of the state's municipal courts, of course, typically only hear cases related to local ordinances or, at most, Class C misdemeanors like traffic violations. Municipal courts of concurrent jurisdiction, on the other hand, have the same jurisdiction as the state's general sessions courts to hear criminal cases. And because they are dealing with state criminal law, DAs are required to serve as prosecution in these courts. However, statute says DAs are only required to prosecute in municipal courts of concurrent jurisdiction when the city supplies quote-unquote sufficient personnel, but without explicitly defining what may be sufficient. There are 23 cities in the state that are authorized to have such courts of concurrent jurisdiction, though only 21 have active courts. Cities with these courts of concurrent jurisdiction do fund their operations, including providing courtrooms, judges, clerks, and security, among other things. But only around half of the 21 cities provide funding for DA staff. In 2022, the DA serving Gibson County notified the cities of Milan and Trenton that his office would no longer prosecute cases in their courts of concurrent jurisdiction, citing the absence of such funding for DA staff. That led to a lawsuit in which the trial court ruled in favor of Milan and Trenton, though the case is now under appeal. The extent to which municipal courts of concurrent jurisdiction affect DA staffing needs is nuanced. These courts do not add to the overall caseloads for DAs, as without them the cases they handle would just go to their respective county general sessions court. But representatives for DAs say that ADAs and other support staff, such as victim witness coordinators, cannot be in two places at once. So if a court of concurrent jurisdiction meets at the same time as another court, it could add some strain to the DA staff's workload. The bill from last year would have addressed the DA's concerns over funding, but representatives for cities opposed the bill and raised several concerns of their own. Among these, the bill would have allowed DAs to make funding decisions for the city and might have superseded existing funding arrangements that some cities have with their DA. Several cities questioned why they should fund a full-time ADA position when their courts meet infrequently, and some pointed out that their courts already operate on tight budgets or even at a loss, and that if required to fund a full-time ADA, they might give up their concurrent jurisdiction. While the impact of that could be minimal in some judicial districts, in others, the transfer of a large case volume could create costs for the County General Sessions Court. For these reasons, the draft report does not recommend the bill. Given the variability among municipal courts of concurrent jurisdiction and the caseloads they handle, it would be beneficial to assess each court's individual effect on DA staffing needs when determining what, if any, funding cities with these courts might be asked to provide. That could be informed by a weighted caseload study, which state law requires the comptroller to produce, though the comptroller hasn't been able to produce one for DAs and public defenders since fiscal year 06 because of challenges in data collection from general sessions courts. The draft report recommends that the state undertake a weighted caseload study as soon as is feasible to establish the staffing needs of district attorneys based on all the courts they serve, including municipal courts with concurrent jurisdiction. In the meantime, and acknowledging that courts of concurrent jurisdiction could generate at least some additional staffing needs on DAs, a reasonable compromise on funding can be found among the existing voluntary agreements that 13 of the cities with these courts already have with their DAs. The structures of these agreements vary, but considering the variation among courts and the funding concerns of some cities, per diem arrangements, like the one used in Smyrna, may offer a suitable approach to balancing the needs of DAs and cities until a weighted caseload study can be completed. Therefore, the draft report recommends that to assist with district attorney staffing needs prior to the completion of a weighted caseload study, each city with a municipal court of concurrent jurisdiction that does not already have an existing funding arrangement with its DA should negotiate a per diem payment for DA staff. And so with that, I'm happy to take any questions that you may have.
Are there questions, members? Mayor Frank.
Yes, just a clarification question on the weighted caseload. So if the recommendation is to do that, and I don't know a lot about the weighted caseload process, are you recommending it also break down the jurisdiction or the location where that case is heard? Is that what you're saying?
Well, so generally, the caseloads would take that into account. And in order to do that properly, they would have to obtain the data from these municipal courts of concurrent jurisdiction. So they would be taking into account some of that in the weightings, yes.
Okay. But it would be data that we could see?
Yes.
Okay. And then can you include, so you have in there courts of concurrent jurisdiction, but I don't know if there are other counties like Anderson across the state of Tennessee, but we have a private act, so we have 2 locations. So you have a general sessions court in the county seat, and then you have another general sessions court in another location. And so I would hope that we could also include that in the recommendation if that needs, to have language clarification or something like that. And then one more, just very quick, Mr. Chairman, on the weighted caseload. If you can help me understand, when we look at that, is the case, I'm going to say there's one person who goes to court, but he may have 10 various charges. Are we able to see if this is one individual with multiple charges or if each of those charges counts as a case?
I'm not entirely sure. I would have to check. We may have to ask AOC for details on that. It has been a number of years, and they do sometimes, these weighted caseload studies have to update or change some categories to reflect, broader changes in courtroom practices. So that may be something we have to check with them.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Peach.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's a little bit, probably just more of a statement, but, the more I've thought about this, it was presented as a funding issue, but it's really not a funding issue at all. It's a time and location issue because the district attorneys are going to be prosecuting the exact same cases, whether they go to that city or whether they do it in the county general sessions, because the police are going to arrest the same people. It's just deciding, if they arrest them here in this jurisdiction, we're going to take them here. Same DA, his same people are going to do it. So to me, I feel like if there's, obviously government works best when they work together, and that's what we would wish for everyone. But if there was going to be legislation, what I would ask for us to look into, to recommend, is for there to be an agreement between the district attorney's office and that municipal court with concurrent jurisdiction as to time and place of their dockets, so that the DA doesn't have to go through all these extra steps and they can work out together, require that agreement somehow via statute, whether it's in the municipal court statute that came along several years ago. But that's just what I think. I think it really shouldn't even be about money because they're going to be prosecuting the same cases. But obviously they need the ability, as you said, not to be in two places at once. That's not fair to the DAs at all. So that's just my comments.
Thank you, Mr. Peach. Are there other questions? There being none, then we appreciate your report. I'm sure we're going to give it thoughtful consideration before we approve the final report. I will defer to our director. I believe the next item of business is to planning for the next meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So just for our next meeting dates, as you know, we normally have our spring meeting in the May-June timeframe. We really won't have a better idea of when that might be until we see how this session is going, because we wait until the end of the session to have that meeting so we can approve future studies. So what I would ask, and April will be reaching out to our members to find out any dates that don't work in that time frame. I know there are a lot of often groups have their meetings as well. So she'll be reaching out to you, and we're just going to ask you for dates that we can plan around, and then we'll propose some dates. I know that we're looking at trying to better coordinate with other committee dates as well. So just expect an email from April soon. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? I appreciate that. Is there any other business to come for us? I don't believe that there is. The chair will entertain. We're adjourned.